Hey there, I'm doing just a short recording because I've been thinking about things that I can share with you by way of this video. I've actually been traveling the last couple of days. I'm in New Jersey right now, northern New Jersey. So traveled up here from my home in South Florida. And I was able to get some knitting done as part of this trip, even though it's a work trip. Been up here doing some work, but found some time for some knitting in between. And same project I talked about last time is now just about finished, which is my Wool of the Andes socks in Amethyst Heather. This is a KnitPicks yarn. I mentioned before that it's a worsted weight and it's knit at a pretty tight gauge, as I think is a good idea for socks. As you can see, stitches are pretty close together. So I finished these except for the true finishing portion, which is weaving in the ends. So I have 2 ends to weave in on each sock. I've actually started doing that on this sock. I've turned it inside out so you can see the wrong side, or the inside, so that I can use my darning needle and start weaving in the ends. My chosen method for weaving in the ends on these is the one I use almost all the time, which is that I just try to use the darning needle, thread the yarn on it, and then go through and kind of follow the loops of stitches. So I go in a sort of up and down, hill and valley kind of motion with the yarn, going over stitches that I have knit so that you really can't see the woven in end. I don't know how you guys like weaving in your ends. I know some people just kind of make diagonal lines and go back and forth so that there's no chance the yarn will slip out, which is part of the whole point of weaving in the ends. I learned this method early on when I first learned to knit, and I like it especially for things that are done in stockinette because it's actually really easy to follow the path of the wrong side of stockinette stitches. And what it does is it makes it so that you really can't see where you've woven in the ends. The area is a little bit thicker because you've done almost like a second set of stitches in that area, but it's not very noticeable at all. So it makes it a neat way to finish off your project. This is on the inside of a sock, and truthfully, after you wear it for a while, it's going to get kind of worn down and might even be a little bit felted if your socks are made of animal fibers. So no actual worry that the yarn will slide out and stick out at the end of the toe or anything like that, but it's just it's a good finishing technique if you're doing it on a garment or something where it might show, or on a hat. It's a nice way to finish it off. I wanted to show you where I keep my tools, such as my darning needle. I have been using this for years. I don't know how many years. It's a little Altoids tin. You know Altoids, it is a mint known as the Curiously Strong Mint. A bunch of them come in these metal tins, and it has a lid that opens. And inside there is where I keep a lot of my knitting tools. Now, I know a lot of people make really cool tool tins, like my friend Sarah, also known as TheSexyKnitter. You should find her online and on Etsy. She makes some really cool tool tins where you can keep things that you want to have near you when you're doing your knitting projects. In my tool tin, I have things like my darning needle, and I have my favorite collapsible scissors. I really wish I could remember where I got these. I've had them for so long, I can't remember where I bought them, but they expand out like this, and they're very useful for snipping yarn ends, like this one that I just finished weaving in on my sock. I can now snip that, and then they collapse back down into very small bow tie like size to go into my tin. I have all kinds of things in here. This is like one of those extra large safety pins almost. I'm not sure that I've ever used that for anything, but it's cool I have end caps for my KnitPicks options interchangeable needles. Sometimes when you take the needle ends off of your KnitPicks needles, like these cable needles, so it's the options interchangeable cable needles. And these, they're called interchangeable because these ends can be screwed off so that you can change needle sizes. So these are a 6, and if I wanted to knit with an 8, I would use a little tool to help screw this needle tip off, and then I would change it. But if I wanted to hold my knitting in place on the cable, because I needed these needles for something else and I was going to come back to this project, when I screw off this needle end, I would put on this end cap to make sure that my knitting doesn't slide off. So I keep those in my tool tin as well. I've got tons of stitch markers. Stitch markers are great for marking your place in a pattern. They tell you when to do things like start a new round, or if you're knitting lace, they're great for marking a section of a lace pattern so that you know maybe you've reached the center of your shawl or something like that. There's some stitch markers here. Maybe you can see them easily if I put them down on the table. So I have the purple colorway from KnitPicks for those, and they come in different sizes. Depending on the size of your needles, you may want a smaller one or a bigger one. But they mark areas in your knitting to kind of give you a heads up, like, hey, this is the part where you do a yarn over or an increase. They're very handy for that. I have some other things in here. I've got other types of stitch markers, the kind that can be closed, like cute little safety pins. These remind me of something that would be like on a baby diaper. But you can open them so you can attach them to an individual stitch in your knitting, and they can hang off like that. Maybe you're marking a row and you want to count up from there because you need to do a certain number of more rows. You can use them when they're closed. Be careful that I don't like destroy my sock stitches here. When they're closed, you can use them on a needle just like you would a circular stitch marker to mark a certain place. So I really like these because they're versatile. They're kind of big, so if your needles are very small, you may not want to use something this big. I keep my interchangeable needle tools in here. This is the tool I was talking about that you actually use in your interchangeable needles to steady the cable end while you unscrew the needle tip, or steady the cable end while you add a needle tip to your cable, and using this little pin and holding it in place while you turn in the opposite direction. Make sure that it gets on there tight, because it is terrible if you have not tightened your needle tip and you're knitting along and your needle and your cable come apart. Ask any knitter. It's like a moment where you just sit frozen for a second and pray that you don't lose all your stitches while you try to rescue them. So that's primarily what I have in here. More of the same of those things, but I've managed to keep this little tool tin now for probably 8 years or more, and everything just fits really nicely in there. It goes inside my Jordana Paige knitting bag insert. If you don't know Jordana Paige, find her online as well. She makes these really cool purses that kind of double as knitting bags, because on the inside they have things like this little pouch where I can keep my tape measure and my tools, and this little pouch snaps into a part of the bag. It's got holders for needles, horizontal holders that you can slide straight needles into, vertical holders that you can slide any kind of needles into, pockets. They're really cool bags. Jordana Paige has done a great job in kind of revolutionizing accessories that hold your knitting. So I'm finished with these socks. I'm going to weave in the ends, then I'm probably going to wash and dry them. First wash and dry before I actually wear them. I'm wearing another finished object, but this is an old finished object. I finished this quite some time ago. This was a summer shawl project. It was kind of a long distance knit along with my friend Nancy. She was also knitting a shawl, and so I started this one at the same time. This shawl is called A Shawl for Jane, and I'll have to look up the designer. I'm not good at remembering all the designer names when I make a project. So I do choose from different designers to make different things. This is by Kathy Crowell. You can find this pattern on Ravelry. It's a shawl for Jane. This is knit in a couple different types of yarn. This bottom maroon dark purple section is a ballet really coarse wool yarn. It's an old Patton's yarn. I'm not even sure they make it anymore. This inside piece, which actually has some sparkle on it. I'll put it a little closer so you can see there's little bits of sparkle in it. And lots of different color variation. I have no idea what that yarn is. This yarn was in my stash for a long time. My yarn stash, my collection of yarn. And it didn't have a label on it. I don't know where I got it from. I think it was gifted to me in a swap or something like that at some point. So unfortunately I can't share the information about it. I'm not sure if it's made anymore or who made it, but I just thought these colors really went well together. There's a little bit of red tones inside this variegated yarn that picked up really nicely with the speckled Patton's yarn, which has some red, blue, green, and yellow. I think they just complemented each other really well. It is kind of primarily a triangle shape. It's almost a crescent shape, but not quite. It'll be hard for you guys to see the whole shape of it, but it has your typical triangular shawl, elongated ends, so that you can wear it multiple ways. I like wearing it. I mean, you can wear it a traditional shawl kind of setup. You put it around your shoulders. I don't tend to favor this option for shawls, but I've seen people wear them like this and they look gorgeous, you know, over a nice plain dress. It really makes the shawl stand out. Just not really my style when I wear these. I tend to do it bandana style, where I put the pointed end, sort of the middle section of the shawl, around my neck, and then I take the wings, if you will, and I wrap them around the back of my neck and bring them back around to the front, and I wear it sort of like a bandana. I guess that comes from like bandit style. But lots of good coverage on the neck and a nice little bit of coverage on the shoulders too, so I prefer wearing it like this, and most of the triangular shawls I knit, I end up wearing them this way, but tons of options with this because I knit this pretty large. I think it was like a 60 or 70 inch wingspan width. So that shawl pattern, A Shawl for Jane, is actually a free Ravelry download. So you can find that on Ravelry and make one of your own. It was a really good pattern to follow. I did have to kind of keep the pattern with me because the sections change on this. So in one area you're knitting a number of rows and you're following a specific chart, and then in the next area you're following a different chart, and so on. So it was good travel knitting in the sense that for a charted area you could do like a section. It was pretty portable in that way, but I wouldn't say it was easy to just memorize and go. It wasn't that kind of pattern. You guys may have noticed my earrings. I got these at Stitch Rock Craft Fair, an annual craft fair in Delray Beach, Florida, and I'm actually going to have to tell you guys where I got them from next time because I can't remember the vendor's name, but I just love them, and since I noticed them as I'm recording, I'll make a note to find out their website information so I can include that in the description of this video. So this is something I knit a while back, but I've had a lot of use out of this last couple of weeks, this week in particular, because I'm up here in the Northeast where winter is for real. Yeah, it was pretty frosty outside tonight coming back to my hotel room. That's where I am. There's lovely artwork in my hotel room. And I was very happy to have all the wool, all the hand knits. I was excited to come back and try on my socks too, because when you're a knitter, you geek out on things like finished objects and finally being able to try them on. So that was fun. I love having a project that's portable, so I love knitting for that. I was able to do a little bit of sketching. I have not kept up on my 2 challenges the last couple days. I'm following some Instagram, I don't know if they're challenges really or just daily prompts, using them as a way to continue sketching and kind of stay with my drawing practice, I'll call it. And I have not done the last 2 days of hand-lettered ABCs, which is an Instagram, I guess challenge is the word, to challenge to, you know, practice hand lettering for all 26 letters of the alphabet, doing 1 a day. And also the 31 Things to Draw Creative Bug course. Creative Bug is a really cool site with lots of amazing classes. One of them is done by Lisa Congdon this month. So it's 31 days of drawing common objects, and it's really just about practicing and spending time with your pens or your pencils or your paints and drawing these common objects in the way that she demonstrates or in a way that makes sense to you, which I love. There's a lot of freedom in it. So I have been keeping up with some of them. You know, roses was one of the days, just as an example. So I followed her examples for how to make some common rose shapes, doing petals, doing rosebuds, and then I just kind of freeform drew something that's more of a flower. I don't know if that's considered really a rose shape, but you just make your own interpretation, and I love that, because when I go and look at other people on Instagram who are doing the same challenge and see how they've interpreted the drawing item for that day, I really am so impressed by everything I've seen, and just the commitment to try to draw daily. I think is pretty cool. One day was cats, so I had fun with that. The hand-lettered ABCs challenge, as I said, is 1 letter a day till you've gone through all 26 letters, and there's no strict rules, really. A lot of people are using it to practice their calligraphy, which I just am so amazed by people who can make letters look gorgeous, something that seems so simple. So you should check it out on Instagram. Hand-lettered ABCs is the hashtag to find a lot of people who are doing that. Hand-lettered ABCs is actually also the Instagram account where this challenge was started. So I did, you know, when it was the day for the letter F, you can see I did an F, but in the shape of a tree, and it says Fridays at the feeder. So it's a bird at a feeder, and the tree is supposed to be in the shape of the letter F, because I just decided to be a little creative with the letter part of it. Some days I just practice the actual letters to see if I can do some hand lettering and, you know, practice holding the pen and trying to make it neat and so on. So lots of opportunity to be crafty and creative in different ways. This is a new way that I'm exploring and working with my sketchbook and pens and pencils. For the letter I found some images of ivy because I wanted to see, you know, what's distinct about ivy leaves and draw those to the best of my current ability to look like ivy leaves. So I like how it came out, and just, you know, the concept of ivy climbing the letter I as my contribution, something I was pretty happy with. And then recent drawing challenge item was mushrooms, day 10 for that creative bug challenge. So that's a sneak peek into my sketchbook. Something I'm finding I look forward to doing. Like, I'm behind now, as I said, because I'm traveling for work, so I just haven't been able to spend the time doing it. I like to do it in the morning if I can. Just get it done and spend the time on it, and then it's a very satisfying feeling to start the day. This is a Moleskine sketchbook that I have, and I learned a lot just after buying this. For example, you cannot use watercolors and any kind of paints in any kind of sketchbook. They actually have specific books for specific media, specific things that you use to create art. So this sketchbook actually has fairly thin pages. I think it's primarily meant for pen and pencil drawings. I happen to use it in multiple ways. I'll put cardstock and other things in it. I've even used some fabric on a couple pages. This is fabric here. This is some cardstock that I cut out and then traced designs on. In the background is watercolor brush pens, and then just some black Micron pens to draw some detail. But it's fine for things like that. Not so great with watercolor paints unless you're going to glue 2 pages together, which is a hint I got from my friend Nancy. And if you do that, then you can do some watercolor on it, because you glue 2 pages together and make it thick enough that you can use that liquid medium. So I learned that if you want to do primarily watercolors, or at least have the option to do watercolor, you should get a sketchbook that actually has pages that are meant for wet media like that. You could do watercolor or acrylic paints. I am nowhere near an expert on any of these things, but it's really fun to learn about it and to ask questions of people who do know about it, because you learn a lot from discovering what you like to do. I like to do watercolor painting. I found that out by trying it. So I did buy another sketchbook that allows that. So just catching you guys up on some things I've been doing recently. I have the opportunity tomorrow to go with a friend of mine, an online friend, I guess as of tomorrow to be a real life friend, because we're going to meet up and go to a yarn store called Knitty City. And I'm very excited about that, because I like getting yarns that are local to an area if I can, so locally dyed or hand spun by someone locally. I always think that's a really cool way to remember a place that you've been to, and then when you make that project, you've kind of commemorated that visit from then on. So very much looking forward to meeting up with Shamika tomorrow and going to Knitty City, and I may do some video there to share with you guys later. Happy crafting, and I hope you all rest well and have a good rest of your week.